And I would encourage folks that do receive advocacy, don't be afraid to say, hey, we're not a good match between the advocate and the consumer, and request another advocate. And if that isn't provided to you, then that would be a red flag, because it's a basic patient right to request a provider that you're comfortable with.
Welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. This is a show presented by Heart and Solutions Counseling Agency. We release new episodes every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central and encourage you to batch up that laundry, put away the dishes, plan for the week ahead, or do any other task that might seem daunting while you give our show a listen. You might just be encouraged to call your therapist, connect with this week's guest, or seek out those services you've been considering for a while but haven't made the commitment to yet. If you are in the state of Iowa and are in need of mental or behavioral health counseling, give us a call at 1-800-531-4236. Enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. My name is Dr. Julie Johnson. I'm the president and founder here at Heart and Solutions Mental Health and Behavioral Health Counseling in Iowa.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt. I am our vice president at Heart and Solutions in charge of the behavioral health department. And this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So we are designed for people curious about counseling, but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
Our guest today is the founder of From Victim to Victor. Christopher Birstler is a New York City resident who has formed this nonprofit to help spread awareness and to show his love for advocacy for mental health care and mental health services. Christopher has a long history in the mental health field. He has worked with many different providers. He is a 4-time suicide attempt survivor. He is also a survivor of trauma. He is a survivor of abuse, and he uses his personal story and his personal journey to spread awareness for mental health care and to help others on their journey towards mental health care as well. So welcome, Christopher. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. So we'd love to hear about your story. So tell us, where did Victim to Victor come from? How did you decide to start this nonprofit?
To paint a picture, I'm going to need to start with some of my own lived experiences with the trauma. I had somebody close to me who was quite abusive from my adolescence into my young adulthood, and dealing with the complexities of that, with the physical abuse and the mental, emotional abuse. It at the heart of all that chaos, I wanted to do more, wanted to help others who were in a similar situation as me, even when I couldn't fully help myself. And so that's how it started. And then years later, it still was on my heart and mind to start a nonprofit. And I eventually did it. And although it's not functioning at the level I would like it to just yet, it is intended to provide direct services, philanthropy, and education for victims of crime and service providers. And more so recently, I've had it on my heart and mind to potentially restructure it and maybe do something more broad with advocacy, with a heavier domain with mental health.
Yeah, so what is, kind of your long-term goal with the organization? What are some of the services you help provide? Do you do the funding for victims to receive services, or what kind of stuff does your agency do?
I have quite a bit of aspirations. One thing for starters is definitely funding. I would like to be able to give back philanthropically to my community, potentially support local nonprofits in my community that deal with mental health and abuse, as well as, and I would like to have an annual gala, which if I was to set a goal, I would say 1 year from now, just to put it out there. And I would like to get use my speaking engagements that I've had through an advisory board I'm on for abuse to spearhead possibly getting more into speaking and consulting as well. And on top of that, I would really like to get it out to the masses and get more out to the masses online digitally.
So it sounds like you're looking at doing more restructuring towards the advocacy side. What kinds of messages are you hoping to share with others?
One message would be you're your own best advocate, and that you need to love and care for yourself before you can be the most supportive to others. And that's something I did not understand at all when I was at the peak of the abusive situation I was in. I wanted to get out there full-fledged and help people when I couldn't even manage my own emotional state from what I was going through, let alone live a life with my abuser in such close proximity to me. And I would say another message that I would like to get out with advocacy is that most is possible with the proper determination and mindset. And I don't say always possible because I truly believe there are circumstances where certain things may not be possible for certain people. And I don't want to give that false notion that anybody and everybody can achieve literally anything on the planet. Because I feel like that would be, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that, and I would feel unethical doing that because that's quite frankly not the case, although most is possible.
Yeah, so you talk a lot about like advocating for yourself and finding services for yourself. Can you kind of go into your own story? And I know you mentioned you had a mediocre counseling experience, so kind of maybe how you found a counselor or how those services went for you.
Okay, I started therapy at a very young age because of some struggles I was going through. But things really took a turn more for the negative once I aged out of the supports I was receiving as a minor and young adult. So, with that being said, I was fortunately still on my parents' insurance until 26 because of the Affordable Care Act. So that was definitely helped me with therapy and getting access to therapy. But being an adult, going from having therapy as a minor to being on your own and having to take the initiative and actually do the legwork and advocacy to get a therapist is much harder than I would have imagined, especially when I'm going through my own mental health recovery and not even being fully aware of that and what that looks like in the moment. So I saw many therapists, even the past 2 to 3 years, I've seen more than I can count on probably both hands and at least one foot. And I actually just started a new therapist this week online on a virtual like teletherapy platform that seems to be going well. I'm just keeping my fingers crossed. But it's an ongoing journey, finding the right finding the right match and just finding somebody who you feel comfortable enough to open up to. And with me right now at my point of my recovery, I worry about, am I going to be burned? Am I going to be what I consider be getting divorced by a therapist because of how they view me on paper in comparison to how I actually am? So that's something I have learned to navigate more delicately this past year. And just not sharing everything up front like the old me would have, being a little bit more guarded for my own well-being and for the sake of I'm not losing the opportunity to receive services that are a good match for me.
Can you share more about what you mean when you say it's been a challenge kind of bringing together what the therapist sees on paper of you and then how you are in real life? And it sounds like maybe there's a disconnect there that's been a struggle for you. Can you tell us more about that? I think other people, as they go through the process of starting therapy or transitioning to other therapists, things like that, I think other people might share a similar experience. So can you tell us more about that?
Yes, there most certainly is a disconnect. I find with myself, the disconnect is my previous suicide attempts and the subsequent hospitalizations associated with them. There been more therapists and providers than not see or hear 4 suicide attempts, 5 hospitalizations within like less than 2 years, give or take, from each other. I'm already more acute than I really am, and my stability is negated by what's on paper with my hospitalizations and attempts. And at that point, before I even have a chance, I'm often already deemed too acute, too high risk, and I'm divorced by the therapist, even though I am stable. And to go off of that, my last attempt in hospitalization was just over a year ago. And even the past few months, give or take, I've even struggled with providers not wanting to see me because of my history. So I would say, advocate, advocate, advocate. You know yourself better than any doctor or therapist will ever know you. Of course, and no disrespect to you folks, but I'm just trying to say that you folks come into play with your knowledge and training and schooling, but I feel that as consumers, patients, clients, we know, like, we are the gate to what you folks, the therapists, need to hear or need to know or to best help us. So advocate for yourselves and don't be afraid to receive other services, such as case management, if that's offered to you. Like, give it a try. And I haven't entirely been received case management to the extent that I'm describing, but if you offered case management for mental health, go with it. Because I feel that if I had it, it would have helped me. I would have been further along in my recovery. And been on my path to a better me sooner.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a disconnect sometimes in terms of that record keeping, and that makes
Mhm.
total sense to me what you're saying. So you had hospitalization records that when systems are so intertwined in the medical field, then it's very, very difficult to meet a provider, meet a therapist, and have that person interact with the you that you are today, as opposed to the person that you previously were. It's sort of like um, in the criminal justice system, right, where your record kind of follows you. And so if you had challenges when you were 18, that can impact you when you're 27. That can impact you when you're 35. And in that period of time, we can be such different people. And so when we're trying to have a fresh start for ourselves, when we've had some suicidal ideation, some suicide attempts, or we've had self-harm ideation, and we're trying to turn a different page, we're trying to live a different life. It can be very difficult to do that when we've got our past kind of following us throughout treatment. And so I just want to encourage you and anybody who is hearing this who is like, yeah, that's me also, right? I got a diagnosis when I was 20, and now, right, anytime I meet with a therapist, that's what they want to talk about. I'll tell you, for me, when I and I've had several different therapists in my life, and I've had some false starts where people will meet with me. They'll ask me what I would like to, work on. They'll ask me about symptomology, and ultimately they'll want to talk about my adoption. and
Wow.
and some people get there, and some people dive right in, right? And the dive right in therapists, I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm kind of done here, because that's a part of me, right? But that's not the reason I'm here. And that's not the reason I'm in session. And so, uh, exactly what you're saying, how important it is that we advocate for ourselves, that we communicate to mental health providers and to our therapists that, listen, this is where I'm at, and this is what is bothering me in my life. And yeah, maybe we will go there, right? But I need to build some trust with you
I can
before
so
we
relate
get
to
to
you.
that. Yeah.
That's the big thing with me. Like, if therapists go right into like asking, "Oh, are you suicidal?" or "Oh, like what meds are you on?" Like, in my mind, it's like that's not trauma informed. That's not therapeutic. You need to establish rapport with me where I feel safe and comfortable before you dive into such deep, intimate, like almost scary topics.
Absolutely. I love what you're saying there too about, I think it's so important, and I think people need to hear this, that not every therapist is going to believe us when we
Mhm.
say, I'm stable, I'm not having suicidal ideation, right? And so, yeah, if somebody asks us once, or a therapist asks me, like, hey, do you want to talk about this? I'm going to answer them, and I'm going to answer them honestly where I am. And then I do expect that they believe me.
Mhm.
And I think that that's
That's their
something,
job to believe it.
yes,
I feel like they get paid to believe us and where we
yes,
are and to support us through the ups and downs, whatever that looks like for us.
yes,
And
absolutely.
if they're not comfortable with our symptomology or with our history, then we as consumers have every way to know that from the get-go. I would go as far as even say before an intake session is done. And
Mhm.
that transitions to another issue I have with traditional therapy, which is that when they do the intakes, which are sometimes very taxing and draining, just to be told, "Oh, we don't want to work with you because of your history." And I feel that if practices could be reformed across the board, where those factors that could lead a therapist to not work with somebody or read it out from the get-go in a non-intrusive way that perhaps doesn't entail having to sit through an intake or submit a crazy long and in-depth intake in advance just to be told I'm not comfortable working with you.
Absolutely. So in our organization, and I think it's such a good point, and I think it's so important because diagnostic assessments are invasive. They're invasive and they're exhausting. And there's a lot of questions being asked at one time, right? We're having to go through our social history, our family history, or what were our relationships like growing up, right? Well, all of this. And so when we are able to weed out certain aspects before the assessment, I do think that is best practice. So in our organization, for example, we have an intensive kind of intake packet, which is online, and it's, you fill it out before the session. Now, when somebody fills that out, there are certain therapists in our organization that say, listen, I cannot work with people who want to talk about childhood trauma, right? I can't because I'm a human, right? So I'm a human. Maybe they have that experience, right? And so they go, you know what? I'm not going to be the right person, the right fit to be objective because it's going to trigger my own stuff, right? Or
And ethically and morally, that's what I would say should be expected of therapists.
and so, or there are therapists who will say, hey, I'm going through a divorce right now. And so right now I am not going to take on clients who are actively going through a divorce because I'm going to put too much of my stuff onto them, right? I'm going to project too much onto my clients. And I think that is absolutely ethical and fantastic. But what I like about the way that we do it, and what I agree with you, is that we're getting that information before the session, before the assessment. And then our administrative team is going, okay, presenting problem is active. I'm going through a divorce and I'm going through custody issues with my children. That our admin team is going to know, okay, do not assign to this provider because this provider has put on their list, I can't work with people who are going through custody challenges right now. I've got too much, I'm too raw on that stuff for myself right now. And so that person isn't going to go through that assessment only to be told, oh, you're going through a divorce. No, I can't work with you, right? And so same thing here. If you were to write on your, presenting problem on your intake form, like, hey, this is what I'm going through. Yes, I did have these hospitalizations. Yes, I had. Then we would make sure to assign you to a therapist that is experienced there. And it's like, yeah, this is my favorite type of client, honestly, right? Because all therapists are so different. And so I love what you're saying about advocate for yourself, even before the session starts, and asking those questions, because sometimes we go to a one person kind of practice, and we go to somebody who it's just them. It's not an agency that can kind of say, oh, who do I assign to? So ask that person ahead of time, right? Here's what my challenges are. Here's what my history is. Are you going to be able to work with me? Do you work with these diagnoses? Do you work with these symptoms? And I think that's so important, and it does not get said enough. So good for you, Christopher,
Thank you.
for spreading
I
that.
actually have a set of guidelines or requirements that I have that best support me in a therapeutic relationship that I tend to mention at the very beginning of a therapy relationship. And some of those are the need for directness and transparency. But I'll give a caveat and say in a compassionate and therapeutic way that doesn't end up causing me like depression or to get upset. and also some things that really helped me in therapy that I bring up in the beginning is just expectations, guidelines, such as homework, having homework and being accountable for it helps me. I'm not having curveballs thrown at me. So I guess this goes back to communication when you think about it.
It really does. I love that you've put that together for yourself. You know yourself as
Mm-hmm.
a therapy client. You are, and you've used the word consumer a lot. And I love that because we're in America. It's a free market, right? We
It
vote
has.
our dollars, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I love that certain paper towels do the half sheet, right? So I buy those paper towels, right? So I think that it is very inspirational, I think, for people who are either starting out on the counseling process or have maybe been through some of the stuff you've been through and they've gone to therapists and been disappointed, or gone to therapists and said, this did not work for me at all. I'm not going to any more of those sessions, right? And sometimes as clients, we can feel like, oh, maybe therapy just isn't going to work for me, right? Maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I can't, maybe this is just what therapy is and it's terrible, right?
Yeah,
And
I've had those thoughts. I would lie if I said I don't, and I still do. But
yeah,
I'm trying to just. But I believe that if I find the right therapist, that things will be better than that. One therapist will be my golden egg that will help me beyond what the last like 5, 10, 15 couldn't even do half of. And I truly believe that.
I love that. That is so hopeful for people who might be on the verge of giving up hope about therapy. And I love the living example that you are, right? Every time this happens to me, I learn something different. And so one time I learned I need somebody who's pretty direct with me. I don't like
Hmm.
it when people beat around the bush or try to say things in a passive aggressive. I'm not going to hear that, right? So
That's
I
correct.
yes, I
And
love it.
pacifying and coddling is something that really infuriates me as well.
Yes.
Like if I'm coming to a therapist, I'm like, hey, I need you to be direct and transparent with me. And I even go as far as to say, if it makes me cry, I still want you to say it. If you feel I need to hear it, then you most certainly please. Then I most certainly expect that therapist to not pacify and coddle me.
Absolutely. To believe you when you say, hey, even if I'm crying, I need to hear it. And
Hmm.
for the person to go, okay, this is uncomfortable, but this is my job. It's
Hmm.
uncomfortable to say something very direct to somebody who's upset and crying, right? But this is my job. And my client in front of me, the person who has hired
Hmm.
me, has asked me to do it this way, and I'm going to do that. And
Correct. And I'd
that is
rather
the
do
right
that in a
way.
therapeutic, safe environment with the
Yeah.
therapist as well.
Yes, absolutely. Because where else can we do those things? Where else? If we cry in front of our friends, they're going to be like, it's okay. It's going to be,
Exactly.
look at how great things are. Right. And that's not helpful to us.
It's not. And when you're in crisis, that's also not helpful to be told, oh, it's gonna get better. Because if you're in crisis, you need to be validated. I've had friends just I've had a former friend bring faith up when I was expressing ideations. And to me, I'm thinking, I have my faith, but if it's not feeling connected to me now because of my suicidal ideations, like, don't bring it up. Meet me where I am and validate me.
Absolutely. The people around us, they love us and they try, but it's not the same. It's not the same as a
It's not
suicide.
the same as being with a professional
That's
or
up.
being with or talking to a friend who is professionally a professional, but also your friend.
Sure.
Like I have a friend who's a therapist who's studying for a doctorate in psychology,
Hmm.
And that's a very interesting dynamic. Like she's a friend and a professional contact, but professionally she's what she's this. She's a therapist. So it's like balancing, what do I tell her? What do I not tell her? When do I reach out if I need something? When do I not? So I do not want to step over her toes and into her professional hat when I'm not a client of hers. I feel like that wouldn't be fair to her emotionally.
Absolutely. I love how well you understand that professional role. I think that one barrier that sometimes people have with going to counseling is like, why would I pay somebody to listen to me when my friends and family could do it for free? And I think what it really is that these are professional skills that people are trained to do. And so just the same way as like I could paint a mural in my hallway, it would look horrible because I don't know what I'm doing. However, a professional painter will come in and they will put everything to scale, right? They'll make it look the way it should. And so yes, absolutely. Therapy is something that, or when people kind of break it down to like, well, I'm just talking, right? So why should I go to a professional? It really is that difference of, no, these are skills that your friend has been trained to do. So she's your friend, but it's like when you have a friend who does manicures and pedicures for a living, right? And then you go, well, you're my friend, come over and do my nails. And she's like, come to my salon, right? So kind of same thing here. Yeah, and that's such an important distinction. It sounds like you've learned that along the way and you're communicating that so other people can understand that.
I have, and this is a dynamic that I have never been in before, where a friend was an actual therapist by profession, and also a survivor and advocate like myself.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that you're doing online therapy now and you've done in person before. What's that
Correct.
difference like for you? Which do you prefer?
If I had to pick, I would say I would prefer the first session being in person, the intake being in person, face to face, and then having the flexibility of in person and or telehealth, and being able to levitate back and forth as as according to my comfort and my needs. And that's one thing that I think COVID really set us up good with, and that's the whole telehealth, telepsychiatry, teletherapy. Because if I don't feel comfortable going into a clinic, for example, or meeting with a therapist in person because of fears of saying something and not getting home that night because of what I said, then I would rather be in my own home where I feel safer and where I have more control over if something like that was done.
Yeah, absolutely. Telehealth is way more flexible. I feel like Julie just said, been saying that on our episodes lately. So COVID definitely helped, I feel like, kind of increase that flexibility. Yeah, I heard you also mention that you think maybe like case management, if you had been able to involved in that, would have made a big difference. Can you kind of explain to people what that is?
Yes, I would take my best shot at it. Um, Case management is, I would say, in simple terms, a professional, often a social worker, who connects individuals who have high needs to community resources and services to best support what their struggles are. And for me, I was referring to mental health. And I know with certain insurances and situations, there is case management that's specifically for mental health. And I feel that if I had mental health case management, I would have probably been on the journey to getting stabilized even more with my meds than I sooner than now. And I feel like I would have maybe had other resources or referrals possibly come at me more or a more like a burst or a bubble than on different resources or practices here and there along the way. And that would have been very helpful. And then having somebody to connect me with that practice and paint me off as being a strong advocate, but also being like, Christopher's a strong advocate. He accepted my help because he understands that even as a strong advocate, you sometimes still do need that push or that help to get points across.
Absolutely. That kind of holistic approach that case management can do. And like you said, not all insurance companies unfortunately offer it, but a lot do. And here in Iowa, we've got I know that Iowa Medicaid and Hawkeye, they both offer case management and can really help get people connected with those different services and can help to also support people as they advocate for themselves with these different services and being able to say, listen, if that medication manager did not listen to you or ask you questions about how your medication has been affecting you, let's find you somebody else, right, that will listen. And so that case manager can be such a help in helping people who maybe you've never seen a therapist before. And so you go to somebody and you go, oh, maybe this is just how it is. And then you never try anybody else. Whereas that case manager can be like, oh, they didn't believe you when you said this, right? And can go, oh no, that's not right. Like, let's find you somebody else,
And the
and
case manager can also conference the consumer in with the provider and advocate on the phone with them. And I would encourage folks that do receive advocacy, don't be afraid to say, hey, we're not a good match between the advocate and the consumer, and request another advocate. And if that isn't provided to you, then that would be a red flag, because it's a basic patient right to request a provider that you're comfortable with. Like for me, because of trauma, I wouldn't do therapy with those who identify as men. So and the same in healthcare. So just know that, and don't be afraid to say, hey, I need a female provider. And you don't need to even say why, even though it could help, but don't feel like you need to say why.
Absolutely.
And if you're not getting that right or respected, I would say leave if you can.
You're
and
right.
Go by, you're respected.
Absolutely. I think there's sometimes this sense in the field of, well, this client identifies as male, so, let's put them with a male provider. Maybe they'll feel more comfortable, but the opposite is very often true of no.
Yeah, I've had that. It's detrimental.
Yeah.
It literally causes like mini crises sometimes.
Absolutely. That feeling of, well, I'm going to be, if there is a choice that somebody's making on which provider to assign me to, there is this tendency to try to assign me to a male provider, and that's not going to work for me. And so I love what you're saying about like have that list ahead of time. Tell them, and then if they don't listen, tell them again, and tell somebody else until somebody does listen.
Yeah, I had to do that during my last hospitalization last year when after my last suicide attempt, I voluntarily admitted myself to get my meds stabilized, and I had to do just that. I had to speak into us blue in the face, saying I requested female nurses not comfortable with men because of trauma. Then I ended up going off on a male nurse, and then they're like, okay, like it makes sense to us now without saying that to me. Then that did the trick, but it shouldn't take me going off on my roommate and a guy nurse in order for them to take me serious.
Exactly right. It shouldn't have come to that. They should not
It
have.
shouldn't have.
Absolutely.
And if I'm
Absolutely.
on a medical unit or an ER or an ICU, they're not going to challenge that at all, not in a heartbeat. So why do that on a psych unit? That's that's disproportionate. That's in regards to power, and that's not respecting the patient's autonomy and needs.
That's
And
right.
that's not acceptable. Never will be.
That's right. Absolutely. It comes down to you said what you needed, you expressed what you needed,
Mhm.
and you were not believed, listened to, or respected. And that is so important that anybody who's going into any sort of treatment knows that that we have the right to be listened to, respected, and believed when we express our needs. Our needs as clients and, as you say, consumers
Mhm.
are valid. They are what drives the whole thing. The whole system is for people who need the service. So when we say that stuff, when we say, no, I need a female provider, right? I need to have somebody who can be very direct with me, who will give me assignments, who will ask me about the assignments and not just forget about them, right? These are very important things, and it is the responsibility of the counseling agency, of the hospital, of the admin providers and the provider you're telling it to respect that and be open to that, and agency-wide have policies that protect that.
Exactly. I completely agree. Then to give the hogwash, oh, we can't always guarantee a female because of staffing. They don't. That's a blatant lie, and they know it. I know it. So why try to fool somebody and gaslight somebody into submission?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what we try to do here, um, because we try to be trauma informed from the start
Mhm.
to the services, is that if somebody says, okay, I would like a male provider, I would like a female provider, we'll say, okay, here are the options for the male providers we have. Here are the options for the female providers we have. And then if we don't have a if they request a male provider and we're like, we don't have anybody with openings, we say, listen, we don't have anybody with openings. What do you choose? Do you want to go on a waiting list with them? Do you want us to refer you to somebody else? Do you want to see a different provider here? And so always about providing options,
Yeah,
because
options are key,
we have
especially
to.
for trauma survivors.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So necessary to have those options. So I'm so proud of you, Christopher. I am
Thank
hearing
you.
your story. Oh my gosh, I'm so proud of what you've learned about yourself and of what you are willing and open to sharing with others for the benefit of others, because there are so many people, Christopher, going through what you went through and who don't have the self insights and don't have the self valuing that you have as a result of this experience. And so I'm so proud of you in every way for doing this. You're amazing.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So, Christopher, we want to talk about where can people find or get connected with Victim to Victor? If people want to support your cause, people want to learn more about your cause, how can they reach you?
1 second, just putting up the website. One way they can reach me is by cell, area code 718-883-0004. And they can also find me on Instagram at Ryan, RYANS, Ryan's Road in Perspective, and on Facebook at Facebook/CRyan0, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm getting the website for From Victim to Victor. And the from victim to victor website is https://bit.ly/form victim number 2 victor. And that phone number and email on that website are not accurate. But the number I gave is my direct line.
Perfect. Wonderful. We'll put that phone number in the show notes too, so that people have access to be able to reach out to you and talk to you, because like you said, there are so many people going through this that don't know who to turn to. And if they could hear your story here and know that they could reach out to you because you understand what they're going through, that is so powerful, to just not be alone in these experiences. So well done, Christopher. We're big supporters of yours. It's wonderful what you're doing. I'm so excited about your vision for from victim to victor. It's just beautiful. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you for your support and for having me on to share today.
Absolutely. We'd love to hear from you again, maybe in another 6 months or a year, just to be able to kind of follow up with you. I know that you said, you've said it a couple times in the interview. You said, I'm putting it out there in the world, right? I'm putting it out there for the universe to hear. And I'm a strong believer in that as well. And so I know that a year from now, you're going to be doing all kinds of new things that we're going to want to hear about. So we'd love to.
And I believe it in the Clara, and I would be honored to be connected with you folks down the road.
Wonderful.
I am Christopher Birstler, and I need a counselor.
Awesome. Me too. So does Chrissa. we all need a counselor. I love it.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
And so do you.
Thank you for listening to the You Need a Counselor podcast. We are so grateful that you're here. Now, we want to hear from you. Text us or give us a call at 515-650-3231. You can also find and connect with You Need a Counselor on Facebook and Instagram. If you've enjoyed today's show, please take a moment to like, review, or leave a comment, as all of these things help others to find and benefit from the podcast as well. If you're in the state of Iowa and interested in mental health counseling or behavioral health intervention services, give us a call at 800-531-4236. And if you're a provider seeking play therapy CEUs, you can find us on patreon.com/youneedatraining. We'll see you for the next episode, Sunday at 5.